Magnus Wheatley, welcome to Seilmagasinet. You are our guest this Saturday. And for those who don't know you, you are probably one of the foremost historians of America's Cup. You have just written a book, which is, if not a bestseller, it's probably one of the best-selling books on sailing ever. And you were also a commentator, and you were writing the daily reports from the last America's Cup, and I believe you're going to do it again.
Well, yeah, I very much hope so, Mikhail. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Yeah, the American 37th America's Cup was great fun. It was very nice to be a part of history in the fact that it was the first America's Cup where every single training session was recorded, written up, and published because we had the joint recon program, and so there was a huge amount of material that was created, and I managed to write 1.8 million words. And for context, J.K. Rowling wrote 1.08 million words in 10 years to write the Harry Potter book. So it was a very, very intense period, 7 days a week job for basically 2.5 years, and thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyable, but all encompassing and very immersive. And during that time, I also wrote my book, There Is No Second, and that was kind of a side project to the main project of doing the America's Cup. And yeah, it's been a very, very busy couple of years, I can say.
Absolutely. And to talk about your book, I've read it, of course, and it's a great history, not only about sailing, but also the background, the people involved around 1850. It's a fascinating story of the social scene, both in UK and in the US.
I think a
So
lot of I think a lot of authors say the book writes itself. And once I had the cornerstone of tracing the signal master, the name of the signal master that may or may not have said, "Ma'am, there is no second," to Queen Victoria as she sat on the Victoria and Albert steamship up in Alum Bay. Once I had that as a cornerstone, um, I then started to look into the socio-political backdrop, and then started to look at the people, and on both sides of the Atlantic, the members of the Royal Yacht Squadron and the members of the New York Yacht Club. These were just the most fascinating characters, and it was an enormous pleasure to write.
pleasure to read also. But this all means that you are quite an insider to the America's Cup. And what we're going to talk about today is the current situation within the British efforts for the America's Cup. As we know, Ben Ainslie has been running the last two campaigns and backed by Sir Jim Radcliffe with Ineos and his company and all his technology from Mercedes-Benz and elsewhere. And now they have split up, and we don't quite know what's going to be the future. Radcliffe claims that he's planning for another campaign, and he has 100 designers working for him, and all the money, of course, that he needs. Whereas Ben has the public support, it seems, and the support of his club, the Royal Yacht Squadron, the Challenger record. He has a team, but perhaps not all the money at the time. Tell me, what's the story?
Yeah, so I think the negotiations fell apart. There was an agreement in place to the end of December 2024. And well, how many days are we in before the announcement was made? There's clearly been negotiations over the last few weeks, and they've fallen apart. I would suggest two things here: that it's money and risk. I think Jim likes to load his sports people with a certain degree of jeopardy and risk. And if we look at the Athena Pathway program, it's pretty sure that Jim pushed that all onto Ben. And you have to look at Ben as a 47-year-old man. He has two children. He has a beautiful wife. He has commitments. And I would suggest he didn't want to go into another monetary risk profile, with Athena Holdco into the next cycle. And I can understand that. And he wanted Jim to probably put more money in and commit further to the Athena project and the pathway programs and the future of British sailing, whereas Jim probably just wanted to win the America's Cup and that's all he wanted. I've heard that there may have been some negotiation about Ben being on or off the boat. I honestly don't think that's an issue to Ben. I think he's, as he's done with Sail GP, he's very happy to step off. He's very happy to sit on the sidelines. Does he want to take a CEO role? That's a question. He is the CEO of the Sail GP team, so I'd suggest that would have been something he would have been very comfortably done. So I really draw down to the money side of things and the risk that Jim was asking Ben to take. And if you look at the company's house accounts of Athena Holdco Limited, which is Ben's racing entity, the last published accounts show an overdraft of £13 million. That's a lot of money to you and I. Ben is one of us. He's a good guy. He's a sailor. But 13 million overdrawn, and there are 2 charges over that business from UBS Bank and Credit Suisse Bank. And that this was to purchase not only the Sail GP franchise, but also to commit investment into the Athena Pathway program. And we don't know how much Ben was paid. I would suggest he was paid on a performance basis rather than a monthly salary, as is kind of the way these things are done at the very top level. He won the Louis Vuitton Cup, so I would assume that he's made a decent payment back into that business of that money. But it's a lot of risk to take, and I don't think I'd be comfortable taking £13 million risk on sailing. So that's where it's fallen down. I'm pretty certain. And what I do know from whispers and people that I know in the industry is that Ben does have a lot of support behind the scenes. There are people with what I call quiet money, people that you'd never really associate with sailing, perhaps, who are big supporters of Ben. And I certainly know he's got one very high-profile individual who is very big in the sport, who is helping him right now. And that could be very, very interesting. I personally feel if anyone's going to pull it off, Ben is. He has such a massive amount of goodwill. I was at Rourke on the Royal Ocean Racing Club in London on Wednesday evening, and the goodwill in the room towards Ben was palpable. It was incredible. I've been over to New York and last weekend, and there were people there who were very, very supportive of Ben. And, I think he will get the sailors behind him. I think he will find the commercial money, and I think he will find a technology partner, because no one has convinced me yet that Mercedes were the silver bullet, as has been suggested. Nobody has made a compelling case to me that they really, without them, that challenge would have been nothing. I certainly know there were some very good processes, some very good decision-making processes, but I think there was a long period where Mercedes was more of a hindrance than a help in terms of embedding a sailing culture into an engineering culture. And the competitive advantage that they should have had right from the outset, I think, took time to bed in. There's no doubt that the simulation tools that they created were first class. We know they had mission control in London and in Brackley, which would beam live data from the boat back to mission control, so everything could be monitored. We know they had a very good ability to upgrade their software in between races whilst on the water. So we know there was a lot of good things there, but are they the silver bullet? Is that technology replicable? Is it relevant? How good was the simulator? Those are questions that nobody, even on the inside, will let you know. Everything was quite polished PR in Barcelona, and you've been in the America's Cup, Mikhail, and I've been around it for a long time. I tend not to believe too much of what the PR people tell me, and what I'm hearing now is that technology, it's not crucial, critical, mission critical, success and failure depends on it for the next cup. It's all about how you move forward, and a technology partner. Let's say they partnered with an Artemis technology or a Williams Formula One team or somebody. It's not a stretch of the imagination to think that they could do as good a job as Mercedes. And it comes down to, as we saw in Barcelona, it came down to sailing ability as well as the design race. And I think the sailors will all fall in line with Ben.
Right. If you go back to Barcelona, though, Great Britain Ineos team did lose, although winning a couple of races, and their victory in Louis Vuitton Cup was very impressive, of course. But it did seem like the New Zealand boat was a bit faster.
Yeah, I agree.
Quite a bit.
I was predicting last summer, so not last summer, the summer before, that Ineos would do very well. And I was saying, and I had a question. I did a talk at the Royal Ocean Racing Club in Cowes, actually, and one of a very famous boat builder, John Corby, put his hand up and said, "Magnus, what did you see that we didn't see that suggested that Ineos were going to be as good as they were?" And I said, it's all about operational efficiency. And by watching the recon every single day, we could see, and anybody could see and spot the trend of how operationally efficient Ineos were. They could go out on the water, they maximized their time on the water, they were always very quick to rig, they didn't really have too many breakdowns, they were testing stuff, they were pushing the boundaries. If you looked at the other teams, they had issues. They would have breakdowns. They would be slow to hoist their mainsail. They'd be slow to get going. And the operational efficiency of Ineos was at a very, very high standard. It was at such a high standard that I would suggest, and I was suggesting, that they will win the Louis Vuitton Cup. However, there is another level of operational efficiency, and that is Emirates Team New Zealand. And I would say this because I was contracted to them, but we all saw when Taihoro was launched in Auckland, they were up and sailing within a couple of hours. A brand new boat, they were foiling on that first evening, and they are all round from top to bottom. You go from Harry the Chef to Grant Dalton and everybody in between across a very flat structure. They are all at the very top of their game. They are an amazingly efficient outfit. And then you look at the design team and you look at Dan Bernasconi, the greatest designer I think we've seen probably since Olin Stevens in the America's Cup. And they know this game so well. They play it very hard. They're just super efficient all around. And what Ineos came up against, I don't think we actually saw that boat, Emirates Team New Zealand, at its full potential. So the step up from winning the Louis Vuitton Cup to winning the America's Cup is these are the hard yards. It may not be too much, but it's Everest to climb. And we as British can come away and say, yes, first time that we've been in the first time we've won the Louis Vuitton Cup, first time we've won races in the America's Cup. Gosh, we're really knocking on the door. Ben knows, if I know it, Ben knows it. It's a very big ask to go to the next level in the current format with the current design rules and everything else to get above Team New Zealand. And I think they are probably a way away from winning because that level of efficiency and that team structure that Grant Dalton's put in place is amazing.
And of course, they have the benefit of having had this team going for a long time, so they have more experience than anyone else.
Well, they are. You could say the same about Luna Rossa. They've been in the game for 30 years. A continual team with good people in there. It doesn't necessarily mean success. The Brits have been going at it for 10 years, 15 years or so. But yes, it's the people. It's a very unique culture inside Team New Zealand as well, and it's quite a closed group. that if you're on the inside, they're the most welcoming and lovely people you could ever imagine. Or if you're on the outside, you are the enemy. And they are led from the top. They are led from a guy at the top who is so invested in the detail that it's incredible to watch. So if you're a sailor and you have an idea for, say you're a cyclor on the boat and you say, oh, we could do something different with the gearing, or we could do something different with our position. All you have to do is call the chase boat over, and Grant Dalton's there, and say, Grant, I think we could do this differently. If you're saying something that makes the boat go faster, the next morning it'll be on the boat. And that's the efficiency that Grant has brought into the whole game. You couldn't say the same about the British. That would have to go through a whole committee structure and be evaluated, and the designers have to look at it. And so I think there's a deftness of decision making on Team New Zealand that, if you look at any top organization, you look at the Elon Musk stories and the Jeff Bezos stories, they all have a very clear line of decision making, a very fast line of decision making, and that is something that I think is very hard to replicate. And Team New Zealand they all trust in each other so much. There's no hierarchy, no structure. There's Grant at the top and everybody else. And it's impressive. They are the greatest sports team ever to sail in the America's Cup. We go back to 87, we go back to 83, we go back as far as 1851. We can go anywhere you like with this. We could go to Vanderbilt in the early 1900s. And I still would contest or contain that Emirates Team New Zealand is the finest team that we've ever seen in the America's Cup. And that's hard to beat. This is Michael Schumacher era Ferrari. This is Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls. This is as good as it gets. So, but that does change. And the America's Cup is a technology race as well as it is a team race. So technology matters. The one thing, I was at the America's Cup Hall of Fame, Kevin Shoebridge's induction, and he stood up and made a speech and said, people win the America's Cup. And it's the people that you have around you that allow you to make the decisions, allow you to have the freedom to go design-wise where you want to go, the trust that people have with each other. And it's people that win the America's Cup. And Team New Zealand has the best people at the moment.
Right. Okay, but let's go back to the current situation. It's
Sure.
the Royal Yacht Squadron. This seems to be in a bit of a fix right now. They have to convince the defenders that they are worthy of being challenged to a record.
That's a very interesting point to make, and one that I made on my blog this morning. Rule 69 is there's a challenger meeting in London today, and there will be a number of other syndicates there eyeing the situation and seeing the whites of the eyes of the Royal Yacht Squadron representatives, and seeing, have they got the lawyers, have they got the will, have they got the team, have they, what is RYS Limited, because it's the arm, what is that entity, and are they up for the fight here? They will be supported by Team New Zealand because Team New Zealand has accepted them as the challenger of record, but there will be others eyeing the situation, and you can't get away from that. That's what's happening. The other thing I said on my blog today is, please don't underestimate the Royal Yacht Squadron. Inside those castle walls are some of the brightest, most connected, most intelligent people, and they very, very rarely make a mistake. So I would suggest that they will be fine as the, certainly from an administration point of view, as challenger of record. It's how things work underneath. And I think Jim Radcliffe is cast out. He's looking for a yacht club. Where he goes, we don't know. There's been a few names suggested to me. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. Where RAS go is looking at Athena Racing as their appointed sports team, representative sports team, and they will be working with Ben to secure the funding in order for that to happen. So it is a tense time. It is, I don't think it's catastrophic. I don't think there's, the Kiwis will be supportive, but the protocol and the class rules need to be agreed. The 38th edition needs to move forward, and there will be the likes of Alinghi, New York Yacht Club, and the Italians, Circola della Vela, looking very closely at this and looking for any chinks in the armor and any sign that their future investment is not going to be is going to be guarded and is going to happen. So it is really tense today. Friday in London, all the big dogs are in town, and it's a tense moment.
So do you see that Royal Yacht Squadron is going to base their challenge show record on Ben Ainslie then?
Yes, 100%. That's where I've been told off the record. That's where it'll be, and yeah, I've been told very quietly that that Athena Racing is their entity, and I think they will pull it off.
Do you think that there will be 2 British challenges next time?
Well, this is interesting because it was actually announced in the Formula One press that Ineos Sports Group are doing a full review of all of their investments in sport. But the reason why it was announced on Formula One is because they wanted to make it, this obviously been leaked to several websites in the Formula One world, that the Mercedes investment is cast iron, that's a cornerstone investment, and that's going nowhere. They're very happy. They've made clearly Ineos has made a lot of money on that. It's got a book value now. That Mercedes F1 sports team has a book value of $4 billion. So, and it's going north all the time with the success of Formula One. So they are reassuring everybody that is fine. The next one is Manchester United. Well, Manchester United, Jim Radcliffe has just increased his stake from 27.7% to 29%. He's heavily invested in in building a new stadium there, sorting the club out, sorting the club's finances. So I would suggest Manchester United, whatever the review says, that is staying. Then you have the cycling and sailing and some other. You have the All Blacks, which is not a commercial deal. It's a performance partnership. All Blacks guaranteed to stay. And that's an interesting one because what Jim could do with his money. And then you come down to cycling and sailing. Well, the cycling press, which I read, are all saying that Ineos Grenadiers are looking for a second-tier sponsor, and that second-tier sponsor will work with Ineos. So agreed money is coming from Ineos, and then a second-tier sponsor in order to be able to move up the pro peloton, which is a very difficult game at the moment. That leaves sailing. And sailing is, what have we got? We've got no club, not a lot of goodwill. No, we don't think any sailors, because we're not sure that there's any sailors contracted. If they are contracted, we'll know about it very soon because you could quite easily put a no contact clause in. And it falls into a camp of, you're up against Ben, who is so well known in the British industry and in the world industry, who will siphon away talent very quickly, and people will be committed to him because it's more of a long-term option than it is to go with Jim. So Ineos have got a problem, and is that problem, does the whole America's Cup fall into the too difficult to do job? Well, when you're a billionaire, you can make decisions emotionally, you can make them rationally, you can make them in a sort of competitive juice way. You can do what you want to do. If he says I want to do it and I'm gonna do it, then it happens. And whatever the problems, we'll just get over them. I've got a funny feeling that with the huge commitment of the Manchester United money and the significant commitment of the money into Mercedes, that sailing might is very much in danger of falling into the too difficult camp. There will be a report issued, and the billionaire never has to front the media. He just goes, yeah, no, we're not going to do the America's Cup. I could see that happening. And particularly if obstacles continue to be put in the way, and he can read the room of the sentiment around what he's done with Ben, I think, he may well just choose, I'm just going to sit it out. He could, on the other hand, go, okay, I'm going to sponsor another team. I could sponsor Team New Zealand, for instance. I've already got a sponsorship with the All Blacks. Yeah, I like Grant Dalton. I get on very well with him. I'll write a check to him for 100 million and win the America's Cup that way. You just don't know that billionaires have a way of working different to how you and I think, and trying to forejudge what Jim Ratcliffe is going to do with his money and with his time and with his effort and with the resources that he's got with Mercedes. Who knows? But yeah, that the rumor. I had a friend from Barcelona, him, emailed me, texted me, and just said, "Ineos Team New Zealand, you heard it here first." I'm like, oh god. But
Right.
never say never in the America's Cup.
But they've signed up David Endine, who is a well-known figure in America's Cup yachting. What does that mean?
Yeah, so David's gone from chief operating officer to chief executive officer on Ben's departure, and an interesting appointment. I know he's highly respected in the British team, but I think he's got a real uphill job and it really depends on contract law here. Which sailors are contracted, and which parts of the team are contracted and have follow-on contracts with Ineos. And there's a lot of people saying that there is no follow-on contract. If that's the case, David Endine's got one of the hardest jobs in the world, because you've got to go and find British sailors if you're going to go under a British flag because of the nationality rule. Who do you go and get? Well, names I've heard, Paul Goodison will be waiting in the wings. Well, I understand that Paul is contracted to American Magic, so I don't think that's an option. Who else do you choose? There are only finite number of sailors who have the ability to sail at this level, and we saw it probably more than we've seen it since the glory days of the America's Cup, of how important the sailors were to the overall outcome. The match racing skills were highly valued. As the AC 75 rule gets shunted ever further down into one corner, the design side of the America's Cup is diminished. And we saw this with the IACC boats. It comes down to the skill of the sailors. And there were marginal gains that people like Alinghi in 2003 held over the rest of the challengers. They had a bit of an edge on Team New Zealand, to be honest, because that boat was dreadful. But it was a marginal advantage capitalized on by an amazing group of sailors: Coots, Butterworth, Daubney, Fleury, you name the legends of sailing. It could well be the case that come the 2028 or 2027 Cup, that the sailing is highly prized. We saw it in the final, because Ineos had the Ian Williams move of coming in on the port entry, going around one of the ends, and then dialing deep down into the box. Team New Zealand spent hours in the simulator trying to counter that, to put a penalty on. They missed it in one of the races. They nailed it in, I think, the third race. They nailed them and caused a penalty. But that's pure sailing, and that's really heartening for people who have criticized the America's Cup, saying that it's not a sailing contest anymore. It really is. And the sailors, there are only a few in the world who can do what Pete Burling, Ben Ainslie, Dylan Fletcher, Nathan Outridge, what they can do. There's only a few people in the world. And that's a skills gap that has been created from quite a long way back, from 2015 onwards. That's a skills gap that is a very real thing. So who does Jim or David Endine go and approach to come and sail for them? And under which flag would they have, if, say, they challenged out of Yacht Club to Monaco, would they have emerging nation status and therefore could hire who they wanted? It's going to be, if they do go ahead, it could be febrile times.
Okay, well, let us conclude. It looks like Royal Yacht Squadron is going to carry on as the challenger record, probably with Ben Ainslie, whereas Jim Radcliffe and Ineos team is a dark horse, perhaps for an Royal Yacht Club.
Yes, I think that's a very good assessment. I think my gut feel is the Royal Yacht Squadron will do what the Royal Yacht Squadron always does, and they will outperform and will surprise people with just the level of resource that they've actually got. I think Jim Radcliffe, I would suggest it is 50-50 whether he goes again. I don't believe the press release that they've got 100 scientists and engineers working. I just don't believe it. What are they working on? I think that was a rushed out press. The PR around both camps has been disastrous, absolutely disastrous. And I think big lessons need to be learnt there that, don't say things in haste. And I couldn't believe the Ineos announcement where they didn't even acknowledge Ben's contribution to the sport, to the team. That's outrageous. I mean, absolutely outrageous. And I think that's where the goodwill stems from, because you can see everything you need to know about how fraught those relations are in that press release. It was just terrible. And then I think the response, there was some very poor wording in that response as well from Athena Racing, and I think they just need some cool heads. I think they need to just calm down, let the dust settle, and I'm absolutely convinced RYS Limited will be the challenger of record. They will play a blinder today, and they will, smooth some ruffled feathers, and we should have at least one British team, which I think will be Athena Racing in the 38th America's Cup.
Thank you, Magnus. That sums this up pretty well. But as you know, America's Cup is America's Cup, and there will always be surprises.
Yep, absolutely. No, or as they say, always bet on self-interest. It's always in the running somewhere. I think it was Dennis Connor's quote. Yeah, it's going to be expect the unexpected. But I think as we can see it today, that's perhaps the likely outcome. But who knows? I'll come on the podcast in a couple of weeks' time and it'll all be different.
Thank you, Magnus. Have a good
Thanks,
day.
Miguel.